Today's video is a proposal system that could help fix the problem of tunneling. Tunneling is when a killer repeatedly hooks the same survivor in order to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Some people see it as a natural evil or part of the game. Some people see it as an issue. Personally, I think if it's not an issue now, it definitely will slowly become more and more of an issue. The developers are quickly addressing things like camping being too good, very aggressively. They might also do anti-slugging at some point to make that less appealing. And as these alternative playstyles like defending 3 gens become less and less viable, it will become more and more logical for killers to try to get rid of one survivor, which has pretty much always been the go-to best strategy for killers. Now, before we address tunneling, I think we need to talk about which types of tunneling we're trying to correct. In my opinion, there are roughly 3 types of tunneling, and not all of them are necessarily bad, or not all of them need to be addressed. The first one is the more casual, loose, almost accidental type of tunneling. This is when the killer ends up hooking the same person twice, but they didn't really try to do that. It was either an accident, or there was no one else, or there was someone else, but they were hiding. And at this point, the killer ended up hooking the same person twice, but it doesn't really affect the outcome of the game. The game might have already been lost, or it might have already been won, or it might already be the end game. This, in my opinion, is not a tunneling that is very problematic. Survivors have a wide variety of perks to combat this. They can have stealth perks to hide. They can have healing perks to heal themselves quickly. They can have anti-tunneling perks that last a long time, like off the record, to even avoid loose tunneling. So I don't see this as a problem at all. The more deliberate tunneling is when a killer sees the opportunity to go for someone right after they get on hook, or very shortly after, and they take it. They could go for someone else, but they think, it's almost too easy, it's almost too tempting. This is the type of tunneling that happens most frequently. It's almost a crime of opportunity. And in my opinion, with all of the current perks in the game, this isn't too bad. If the killer occasionally tunnels someone, this is the moment where anti-tunneling perks are going to be very, very helpful. If you have decisive or off the record, it's probably going to help you quite a bit. And if the killer is successful and manages to tunnel one person off, it's not the end of the world. The person will probably be on stage 2, or maybe the gens will be done because the killer has probably hooked other people. Perks like deliverance or reassurance or all other kinds of anti-momentum survivor perks will come into play. So it's not that big of a deal, in my opinion. The real problematic tunneling is the aggressive turbo tunneling, the very much deliberate hard tunneling, we could call it. This is when a killer goes out of the way to pick a survivor, hook them. At this point, they might injure a few other survivors or kick some gens with pop or apply pain res, and then they immediately go after the unhook, hit the survivor immediately. This obviously prevents all kinds of healing perks from really working because it's so immediate. Any stealth perks don't really do much at this point because the killer never really has a chance to lose you. And then they'll down the survivor, they'll pull them on the hook. Again, they'll get another pain res or another pop or whatever, and then they'll do it again. And this will result in a very common scenario where you have 3 hooks and already 1 kill. And sure, maybe the survivors have done a gen or 2, but at this point, the killer still has pain res on the other survivors, still has pop on the other survivors, and the 3v1 is very brutal. Not to mention that this is often done by killers that are high tier in the killer tier list. They are very, very strong. You can't really body block against them. You can't really last very long in chase. So at this point, you are in a lose-lose 3v1 scenario. This is what happens in tournaments oftentimes. The killer will just focus on one survivor, try to get them killed because they can't really afford to do anything else. This, in my opinion, is the problematic type of tunneling. Sure, if there were no S tier killers, survivors could always come and take hits. Although, let's be honest, in solo queue, this would probably still never happen. But this is the type of tunneling that I think makes the game less fun. I don't think there should ever be a scenario where if survivors are doing their best and they're not making any obvious mistakes, a killer gets a kill only after 3 hooks. Keep in mind, you can get 8 hooks and 0 kills. But if you do it right and you tunnel, you can get 1 kill at only 3 hooks. This is the type of aggressive hard tunneling that I do think makes the game Very unfun for the person being tunneled, especially if it's a killer that's really hard to avoid, and pretty much hopeless for everyone else. My proposal today only aims to address this type of tunneling. The other types of tunneling, as I explained earlier, can be countered to a more or less effective degree with anti-tunneling perks or all other kinds of perks and teamwork. So it's the very aggressive tunneling that we're going to be trying to correct or heavily discourage for the killers. Here's how we're going to do it. So my proposal would introduce a new mechanic called burden. Survivors could use this mechanic to prevent a situation where a killer can sacrifice one survivor with only 3 hooks. If this mechanic is used, a killer would now need 4 hooks before the first survivor dies. Now, how does this work? This mechanic is completely optional. It can be disabled for alternative game modes, and it can be completely ignored in tournaments so that it doesn't compromise any balance. And it can only be triggered in one situation and one situation only. And that is if the killer has hooked 2 times on the same survivor at the start of the game. In the end game, this doesn't work. If someone else has been hooked, this doesn't work. If the killer has hooked multiple people, it doesn't work. If the survivor hits stage 2 because no one rescues him, it doesn't work. It only works if the killer has hooked one survivor, let's say Dwight, and then has gone out of their way to hook that survivor again. In this situation, now the burden mechanic becomes available for the other survivors. Other survivors that come close to the hook now have the prompt to take burden. If they accept it, second hook stage on Dwight will become yellow, indicating that it can be transferred, and a temporary hook stage will also appear on the survivor taking the burden, indicating that they are ready to be transferred 1 hook stage. They would effectively be taking the burden off the hook survivor for 1 hook stage. Now, mind you, this wouldn't do anything right away. At this point, if the killer decides to go for another person, the burden will be cancelled and nothing will happen. It will be like a normal match. And obviously Dwight will have to be careful because he's dead on hook, but it will be the same as usual. However, if the killer decides to hook the same survivor a 3rd time, this is when the burden will take place and it will be transferred. If the killer tries to hook Dwight a 3rd time, then that hook stage will be instead transferred to the survivor that took the burden. This will activate any perks like pain res or any perks that rely on hooking a unique survivor like Grim Embrace, because technically the killer is hooking the other survivor. And now the Dwight will be on a second stage. In this situation, we now force the killer to still go through several anti-tunneling perks. If he wants to tunnel the Dwight here, he might have to take a lot of risk. And it's taking quite a bit of time, so gens could be done in the background. And obviously camping is now even less of a good idea than before. So this really forces killers to abandon the idea that they will hook one guy, bam. 3 hooks, 1 kill, and now I just defend and play the 3v1. The 3v1 would be delayed at least by a little bit. And what I really like about this is that you can still tunnel, but you cannot do it right away. You can hook one survivor, then another survivor, and then tunnel the second survivor, or the first. But you need to at least chase multiple people. And this opens up a lot of opportunities for survivors. If you have multiple people that are good in the team, and one of them takes the killer for a long chase, well, they can lose the game right there. If you have multiple anti-tunneling perks, now you can use them, you have a better chance to use them. If you have stealth perks or healing perks, since the killer is more encouraged to go for multiple survivors, there is a much better chance that you'll be able to heal yourself with resurgence, or will make it, or that you'll be able to disappear with some stealth perks. So it encourages that variety of perks on the survivor side and punishes killers that are trying to tunnel very, very aggressively while still allowing you to tunnel a little bit if you want to take on that risk. I like that this works against every killer. I like even more so against the killers that you expect to tunnel. And I like that it also is easy to see in the HUD and pretty intuitive. And the best part is that this doesn't affect the normal gameplay too much. It doesn't have any huge implication for the average game, because the average game isn't quite like this. The average game typically revolves around the killer hooking maybe 1 or 2 people before trying to kill someone. So I don't think this is a very, very intrusive change. I think it wouldn't affect most matches, but it would take those matches that are really, really hopeless, where you go against a nurse that triple tunnels your teammate, and make them a little bit more bearable. Now, I can hear some people saying, isn't this a straight nerf to killer? Yeah, but I do think that killer should be balanced around getting a few hooks and then a kill. I don't think the gameplay balance should be geared towards 3 hooks, 1 kill every single time, because let's be honest, the killers that are out of the good at doing that are the S tier killers. You know, we do need an ecosystem where it's more normalized to get multiple hooks before someone starts to die, and where the only option isn't just to hook one person. Right now, I do believe you have a problem because it's such a good idea to tunnel a person. When you tunnel one survivor, you play around deliverance, you play around off the record, you play around so many perks that could hurt you later on. So it makes a lot of sense to do that. So I think if these anti-tunneling perks are nerfed slightly across the board, if other things are tweaked across the board, the game could be balanced around at least a minimum of 4 hooks and 1 kill. And also because hook stages are now 70 seconds, I also would consider slight tweaks to the 2 perks that exist that extend the hook stages. These perks are a little bit silly. Right now, they can allow a survivor to be on the hook for approximately 70 years, which I don't appreciate. So I would tweak these perks as well and a bunch of other perks to accommodate for this. Let me know what you think. Do you think this is a good change? I think this would make I don't know, the game a little bit healthier, and it would be at a point where if this was the new normal, everything could be balanced around it, and we would have a game that maybe is more geared towards killer making a comeback and making a strong play in the middle to late game, rather than everything being decided in the first 2 chases. Because that's kind of what we have right now. You have a good chase, a couple downs, and then everything trickles down. You don't get a down in 1 minute, they pop 3 gens, and it's basically hopeless. It's very binary. So I do like this alternative a little bit better. I considered sending this to behavior first, but honestly, I have more fun sharing it with the community and getting your thoughts rather than presenting this to behavior and hoping that they will consider it. And also, last time I presented this to my stream, people were quite torn and quite undecided on it. I hope that I managed to present it coherently so that you guys understand the idea. And let me know what you think, or if you have a better idea, or if you think there's a simpler, more elegant solution to the issue of tunneling. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.